Have you ever wondered where the line is, the real one? The one between family love and bottomless soul-eating greed. How thin can that line get before it just snaps, leaving a canyon between you and the people you thought you knew? A canyon you can never cross back over. I used to think I knew the answer. I thought family was your shelter, the one place you could run to when the rest of the world turned its back. But I was wrong, dangerously wrong. The story I'm about to tell you isn't some fairy tale about getting rich quick. It's a nightmare. One that started with a dream and ended with a truth so terrifying it almost destroyed everything I ever cared about. My name is Chloe, and I hid $3 million from my in-laws. But what they did for revenge? That was more horrifying than anything I could have ever imagined. Before my life turned into some kind of psychological thriller, it was simple. Honestly, beautifully simple. I'm a woodworker. And I don't mean the kind who assembles flat-pack furniture from IKEA. I'm a craftswoman. I work with the grain, I feel the soul of the tree it came from, I listen to the story it has to tell. This workshop. Chloe pats the worn, scarred surface of her workbench. This is my sanctuary. The scent of pine and linseed oil, the feel of a perfectly flush joint, the deep satisfaction of turning a raw, splintery piece of timber into something beautiful, something useful. That was all I ever really needed. I wasn't rich, not by a long shot, but I was content. I had my own small business building custom furniture for people who actually appreciated the time and skill involved. Every table, every chair I made held a piece of me. And I had Sam, my husband. We met in college. He was an art history major, and I was flunking out of an engineering program before I finally admitted my real passion was building things with my hands. He was the one who saw the artist inside the tradeswoman. Sam was the light in my world. The way his eyes would sparkle when he talked about Renaissance painters, the way his smile could salvage the worst day in the shop. We lived in a small, modest house that we'd fixed up ourselves. I laid the hardwood floors, built the kitchen cabinets, and even crafted the very bed we slept in every night. Our life was built on love, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that it was us against the world. We were a team. And then there were his parents, the Millers. From the very beginning, I knew they were cut from a different cloth. My father-in-law, Richard, was a man who always seemed to be wearing a suit that was just a little too expensive for his means. He'd been a stockbroker, but took an early retirement after a few bad trades he never went into detail about. Now he spent his days chasing phantom investment opportunities, always on the hunt for the next get-rich-quick scheme. My mother-in-law, Brenda, was a woman obsessed with appearances. Their house was immaculately decorated, looking more like a showroom than a place where people actually lived. She was always talking about keeping up appearances and making thinly veiled comments about our small house or my old pickup truck. And finally, there was Kevin, Sam's younger brother. Kevin was nearly 30, but still lived at home cycling through a series of passions that never quite turned into a career. One week he was a DJ, the next, a documentary filmmaker, the week after that he was an app developer. The only thing these passions had in common was that they all required expensive new gear, which Richard and Brenda happily provided. They were a family where money was a constant unspoken hum beneath every conversation. Who had what? Who was vacationing where? Who just bought a new car? Family dinners felt less like gatherings and more like competitive audits of everyone's material success. Me with my sawdust-caked hands and my humble bank account, I always felt like an outsider looking in. Sam was my defender. "They don't mean anything by it, honey," he'd say after another awkward dinner. "They just don't get it." And I believed him. I loved him enough to ignore the subtle jabs and the condescending glances. Life went on like that for a few years. Sam worked at a local art gallery. We paid our bills and we dreamed. We dreamed of one day having enough to buy a small plot of land out in the country and build our own dream house from the ground up. It was a distant dream, one built on hard-earned dollars and careful savings, but it was ours. And then, everything changed. It didn't start with a bang, but with a click. One Tuesday evening, I was cleaning out our storage shed, that graveyard of old things we couldn't quite bring ourselves to throw away. In the corner, under a thick blanket of dust, was a box of my old stuff from college. Textbooks, half-filled notebooks, and an ancient clunky laptop, a dinosaur from more than a decade ago. I was about to add it to the trash pile, but a flicker of curiosity stopped me. I plugged it in, and to my absolute astonishment, it whirred to life. The screen flickered on displaying a pixelated wallpaper of some band I used to love. I started clicking through old files, smiling at cringeworthy essays and blurry photos. And that's when I saw it. A simple text file named Stuff to Remember. Inside was a jumble of old passwords, software, serial numbers, and one line I had completely forgotten existed. It was a long, nonsensical string of letters and numbers, and next to it 3 words: Bitcoin private key. My heart skipped a beat. I remembered it, but only vaguely, like a dream. It was around 2011. My college roommate, a total tech nerd, had been going on and on about this new digital currency. It was going to change the world, he'd said. To get him to shut up, I'd tossed him a $50 bill and said, "Fine, buy me some." He'd set up a wallet for me, copied the private key into that text file, and I'd promptly forgotten all about it. $50 in 2011. My hands were shaking as I navigated to a Bitcoin wallet website and painstakingly typed in that long string of characters. I had to try a few times because I couldn't keep my fingers steady. A loading screen appeared, and then a number. A number with a lot of zeros. I had to squint, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I refreshed the page. The number was still there. $3,142,607.19. I just sat there on the cold, dusty floor of the shed, staring at the screen. The world around me seemed to melt away. The only sound was the frantic, desperate pounding of my own heart in my ears, like a sledgehammer against an anvil. $3 million. From a $50 joke I had long forgotten. It wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. I snapped the laptop shut, then opened it again. The number was still there, mocking me, daring me to believe it. I spent the next hour just staring at it, my brain trying to reboot into a new, unimaginable reality. Our life, our humble, happy, simple life had just been changed forever. What I didn't know then was that it wasn't just changed. It was about to be broken. That was the moment my innocence died. The moment I realized this incredible gift could also be a terrible, terrible curse. My very first thought wasn't about our dream house or traveling the world. My first thought was of Richard, Brenda, and Kevin, and an ice-cold dread washed over me, a feeling so primal and certain it felt like a premonition. If you're watching this and you feel that familiar chill, if you've ever had a secret you knew could detonate your relationships, let me know in the comments. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in that feeling makes all the difference. And before we dive deeper down this insane rabbit hole, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. Because believe me, this story is just getting started, and what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty and betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The number just kept dancing behind my eyelids, $3 million. A figure so absurdly large, it almost felt meaningless. I lay there next to Sam, listening to the soft, even rhythm of his breathing, and I felt an invisible gulf forming between us. Here I was, technically a multi-millionaire, and he, my partner, the person I shared everything with, had no idea. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy weight in my gut, but it was overshadowed by a much more powerful emotion, fear. I kept picturing Richard's face when he heard the news. The way his eyes would light up, not with happiness for his son, but with dollar signs, with opportunities, with the business plans he could finally fund. I could hear Brenda's voice, sweet as honey, but laced with venom, talking about how family ought to help, family, and how Sam deserves the best. I could see Kevin, a smug grin already on his face, planning how he'd spend his cut he would absolutely believe he was entitled to. The next morning, I told him. I took him out to the workshop, the only place I felt truly grounded, and I showed him the laptop. At first, he didn't believe me. He laughed, thinking it was a prank, some fake website. But when he looked into my eyes, when he saw the deadly seriousness and the raw fear there, his smile faded. He sank onto a half-finished oak stool, and he just stared at that number the same way I had. "Chloe, is this real?" He whispered, his voice barely audible. I just nodded, unable to form words. We sat in silence for a long time, but it wasn't the comfortable silence we usually shared. This one was heavy pregnant, with unspoken possibilities. Finally, he looked up, and I saw a mix of pure joy and profound anxiety warring in his eyes. "We could pay off our debts," he said almost to himself. "The student loans, the mortgage. We could build that house. Our dream." Suddenly, it wasn't distant anymore. It was right there within our grasp. "We could baby," I said, taking his hand. It was ice cold. "But we have to be smart about this. Really, really smart." And that's when we had our first real fight about it. "We have to tell my family," he said, the words rushing out. "They'll be so thrilled for us." I looked at him and I couldn't hide my skepticism. "Thrilled for us, Sam. Or thrilled for themselves." He flinched, hurt by my tone. "What are you saying? That's my family." "I know," I said, softening my voice. "But you know how your dad is with his opportunities. You know your mom will start talking about how we deserve a nicer car, a bigger house in a better neighborhood. You know Kevin will be knocking on our door next week, asking for a loan to invest in his latest project," we argued. It wasn't a yelling match, but a tense, sharp debate. Sam accused me of being cynical and paranoid. I accused him of being naive, of wearing blinders when it came to his family. "They love me," he insisted. "And they like you. They tolerate me, Sam." I shot back, my voice harder than I intended. "They tolerate the blue-collar carpenter with dirty hands who married their son. Don't mistake politeness for affection." In the end, after hours of going back and forth, we reached an uneasy truce. We wouldn't tell anyone. Not yet. We would liquidate the crypto, quietly hire a financial planner and a lawyer, and we would lay low. We would go on living our lives exactly as before, at least for a while, until we could figure out what to do. Getting things set up was more complicated than I ever imagined. It involved opening new accounts, talking to men in suits who spoke a language of trusts, portfolio, diversification, and tax implications that I barely understood. Through it all, I felt like an imposter. I'd still go to the workshop every day, pull on my work boots, and breathe in the smell of sawdust. I'd still invoice clients, haggle over the price of lumber, and worry about paying the bills on time. I was living a double life. By day, I was Chloe, the woodworker. But in my head, I was someone else, the keeper of a secret that could change everything. The strain started to get to us. Sam became irritable, distant. He'd look at our frayed sofa, or the small crack in the ceiling with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, impatience. The contentment we once shared in our simple life was being poisoned by the constant awareness of what we could have. "We could just buy a new sofa, you know," he'd say. "We could fix the ceiling." "And how do we explain that?" I'd shoot back. "What do we say when your dad asks where the money came from?" The conversation would always die there in a tense, awkward silence. And of course, the Millers didn't disappoint. It was like they had a sixth sense for a change in fortune, even a hidden one. About a month after we found the money, Richard invited us out to dinner. It was a fancy steakhouse I knew for a fact he couldn't afford. Over the meal, he pontificated about uncertain economic times and a tough market. Then, after dessert, he made his move. He pulled a glossy brochure from his briefcase. It was a business plan for a boutique real estate venture. It was full of vague buzzwords and financial projections so optimistic they were practically science fiction. "All it needs is a seed investor," he said, looking directly at me. "Someone with vision. Just $50,000 to get it off the ground, Chloe. The returns would be astronomical. I felt my blood run cold. He didn't know. He couldn't possibly know. This had to be a coincidence. But the way he looked at me, the way he emphasized the word vision, it felt like a test. I stammered some excuse about my own business being slow and money being tight. Richard smiled a thin, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I understand," he said, but his tone said the opposite. "Opportunity doesn't wait for anyone, my dear." On the drive home, Sam was quiet. "You see," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "That's just the beginning. You're overreacting." He snapped, his voice brittle. He was just sharing his passion. He doesn't know anything. But I could tell he didn't believe it. Not entirely. The first crack in our wall of secrecy had appeared. His family was probing, testing the boundaries just like they always did. Only this time, the stakes were unimaginably higher. A few weeks later, it was Brenda's turn. She called Sam, crying hysterically. A friend of hers, someone from her book club, had just been diagnosed with a rare illness. The treatment was experimental, expensive, and not covered by insurance. "It's just tragic," Brenda sobbed. "That poor family, they're going to lose their house. If only someone could help them." It was a masterful performance of emotional manipulation. She never asked directly, but the message was crystal clear. She was planting a seed of guilt in Sam, knowing her son had a kind heart. That night, Sam came to me. "Can't we help them, Chloe? Just a little? We could do it anonymously. We have so much and they have nothing." "We don't know these people, Sam," I argued. "How do we even know this story is real? This could just be your mom's way of testing us." "You're being heartless," he cried, tears welling in his own eyes. "This money is changing you. You're becoming one of those selfish rich people we used to make fun of." His words were a knife in my chest. Because a small, terrified part of me was afraid he was right. Was this secret turning me into a paranoid, miserly monster? Was I protecting us, or was I just protecting the money? The line was getting blurrier every day. I gave in. We sent an anonymous cashier's check for $10,000 to a fund that had been set up for the family. A week later, Brenda posted photos of her and Richard on a surprise trip to Europe. The caption read, "Living our best lives, number YOLO." I showed the post to Sam. The color drained from his face. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The money had never gone to the sick family. It had funded wine tasting in Tuscany. The deception was so blatant, so shameless, it was almost comical. But I wasn't laughing. I was beginning to realize this wasn't a game. Sam's family wasn't just greedy. They were predators, and we were their prey. The only problem was they didn't yet know just how big their prey really was. The drive home after the Tuscany incident was the quietest we'd ever shared. It wasn't a comfortable quiet. It was a dense, suffocating silence, the kind that fills a room after a bomb has gone off. Sam stared out the passenger window, his reflection, a ghostly image against the passing streetlights. I could feel the waves of shame and humiliation rolling off him. He was ashamed of his parents, and he was angry at me for being right. It was a toxic combination, and I knew better than to say, "I told you so." The words were screaming in my head, but I swallowed them down, tasting bile. For the next week, we moved around each other like ghosts in our own home. The easy intimacy we'd always shared had vanished. We didn't touch. We made small talk about groceries and bills. The $3 million was a sleeping dragon in the center of our living room, and we were both terrified of waking it. I tried to break the tension. I'd make his favorite dinner or suggest we watch a movie, but his responses were listless. His heart wasn't in it. He was caught in a painful tug of war between the family he was born into and the family we had built together. I realized then that his parents' greatest weapon wasn't their shamelessness. It was Sam's deep, abiding love for them. He couldn't reconcile the manipulative, greedy people I saw with the parents who had raised him. In his mind, they were still the dad who taught him to ride a bike and the mom who baked cookies for him after school. He was mourning a version of his family that I was beginning to suspect had never really existed in the first place. And just when a fragile peace began to settle, just when we started talking again, really talking, the next assault came. This time it was Kevin. He showed up at our door on a Sunday afternoon unannounced. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had the frantic energy of a cornered animal. Sam let him in his expression a mixture of concern and dread. He paced our small living room, running his hands through his unkempt hair. "I'm ruined," he announced to the room, his voice cracking with manufactured despair. "It's over. Everything is over." He launched into a long, convoluted story about a revolutionary new app he'd been developing. It was, of course, the next big thing. It would change social media as we knew it. He'd poured his heart and soul into it, he claimed. He'd found a developing team in another country, and they were on the verge of a breakthrough. But now his investors had pulled out at the last minute. The developers were demanding payment, or they would sell his code, his genius idea, to a competitor. He was on the brink of losing everything. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, complete with trembling hands and a single dramatic tear that rolled down his cheek. Then he turned to Sam, his eyes pleading. "I know it's a lot to ask," he choked out. "But I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. I need $75,000, Sam, just to cover the final development costs. I'll pay you back, I swear, with interest. This is my one shot to finally make something of myself to make you and Mom and Dad proud." He completely ignored me as if I were just another piece of furniture in the room. He knew his target. He was playing on every insecurity Sam had about his family, every ounce of his big brother guilt. I watched Sam's face crumble. I could see his resolve melting away under the heat of his brother's crocodile tears. He looked at me, his eyes begging me to give in. But I couldn't. This wasn't a test anymore. This was an invasion. This was a shakedown. "Kevin," I said, my voice calm and level, cutting through his dramatic monologue. "That sounds like a tough situation. Why don't you sit down and we can go over your business plan together? Let's look at the contracts you have with these developers. Let's see the financials." The air went still. Kevin stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. The desperation in his eyes was replaced by a flash of pure, undiluted hatred. "What?" he stammered. This isn't a business meeting, Chloe. This is family." "I agree," I said, nodding slowly. "And as family, I want to help you succeed. But $75,000 is a huge amount of money. No responsible person would hand that over without doing their due diligence. So let's do it. Let's treat this like a real investment. I'll help you. I'll go with you to the bank. We can look into getting a proper small business loan. With a solid plan, I'd even be willing to co-sign for it." I was offering him a way out, a real solution, a legitimate path. But we all knew that wasn't what he wanted. He didn't want a loan or a business partner. He wanted a handout. Sam looked from me to his brother, his face a mask of conflict. He wanted to believe him, but my offer was so reasonable, so logical, that it exposed the absurdity of his request. Kevin's face hardened. The victim act evaporated, revealing the entitled brat underneath. "I don't have time for that," he snapped. "The opportunity is now. It's a yes or no question, Sam. Are you going to help your brother or not?" He put him on the spot, trying to force him to choose. Before Sam could answer, I stood up. "The answer is no, Kevin. We are not giving you $75,000. His eyes narrowed into slits. "This is you, isn't it?" he sneered, pointing a finger at me. "You've always had a problem with our family. You're turning my own brother against me." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. The fight that followed was the worst we'd ever had. "How could you—" Sam screamed, the dam of his pent-up frustration finally breaking. "That was my brother. He was asking for help." "He was asking for a blank check, Sam, for a scam." I yelled back, my own control slipping. "That app isn't real. Those developers don't exist. Can't you see it? It was just another angle, just like the Tuscany trip." "You don't know that," he sobbed. You just assume the worst of everyone. This money has made you cruel, Chloe. It's made you cold and suspicious. No, I shot back, my voice raw. It's made me careful. It's opened my eyes to what your family really is. They are a pack of wolves, and they are trying to pick us apart piece by piece until there's nothing left. We stood there, panting in the ruins of our living room, words hanging in the air like smoke. The chasm between us had widened into a canyon. He saw a brother in need. I saw a con artist. He saw family. I saw a threat. We were looking at the exact same picture and seeing two completely different worlds. That night, he slept on the sofa. I lay in the bed I had built for us, staring into the darkness, and for the first time I felt a genuine, terrifying fear that I was going to lose him. I had protected the money, but I might have just destroyed my marriage. The next evening, my phone rang. It was Brenda. I answered, expecting another tearful performance, but her voice was different. There was no warmth, no fake concern. It was flat and cold as ice. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with menace. "But you will not get in the way of this family. You will regret this." She hung up. It wasn't a plea. It was a threat. The game had just changed. They were done asking. Brenda's threat echoed in my mind for days. It wasn't the words themselves, but the cold, calculated delivery. The mask had slipped not just for Kevin, but for her, too. The pretense of the loving, if slightly materialistic family was gone. In its place was something much harder and more dangerous. The next obligatory family dinner a week later felt like walking into enemy territory. The air in Richard and Brenda's pristine home was thick with unspoken hostility. Brenda served me dinner with a tight, artificial smile, but didn't speak a single word directly to me all night. Richard, on the other hand, took a new tack. He engaged me in a condescending conversation about the economy, peppering his speech with financial jargon he clearly didn't understand, all while subtly questioning my ability to run my own small business. "It must be tough," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Being a one-woman operation. So vulnerable to market fluctuations. A woman in your position can't afford to miss out on real opportunities." Every word was a jab, a reminder of my refusal to fund his and Kevin's schemes. Kevin was there playing the part of the wounded martyr to perfection. He spoke quietly about his shattered dreams and the devastating setback he had suffered, all while shooting me wounded, accusatory looks from across the table. They were a united front, and their strategy was clear: isolate Chloe. Paint her as the villain, the outsider, the stingy, unsupportive wife who was holding their beloved Sam back from his rightful, comfortable life. The worst part was watching Sam. He was miserable, caught in the crossfire. He tried to bridge the gap, throwing out neutral topics of conversation, but his attempts were met with curt responses or awkward silence. He was defending me to them and defending them to me, and the effort was exhausting him. I could see him pulling away, retreating into a shell just to survive the ordeal. That night driving home, I knew I couldn't be passive anymore. Brenda's threat wasn't just emotional blackmail. It felt like a promise. They weren't just going to be angry, they were going to do something. My mind, trained to see the structure and framework in a piece of wood, started looking for the framework in their behavior. What was their next logical step? They couldn't get the money through Sam because I was the gatekeeper. So they had to either get rid of the gatekeeper or find a key. They had to find leverage. How? By digging. By finding a weakness they could exploit. A few days later, a man I'd never seen before stopped by my workshop. He was in his 50s with a friendly, disarming smile and an expensive-looking blazer. He introduced himself as an old friend of Richard's who was in the market for a custom dining table. His questions, however, quickly strayed from woodworking. He asked about how business was, how I got my start, where I grew up, if I had any family in the area. It was all cloaked in friendly chatter, but it felt like an interrogation. He mentioned my old pickup truck. "Must be hard hauling lumber in that thing. Ever think about upgrading?" I felt a chill run down my spine. It was too specific, too close to Brenda's own criticisms. I gave him vague, non-committal answers, and he eventually left, promising to be in touch. I immediately called the friend who had referred him to me. My friend had never heard of him. He wasn't a referral. He was a plant. That was the turning point. Paranoia, which had been a quiet whisper in my ear, was now a screaming alarm. They were actively investigating me. That night I ordered a set of high-definition security cameras online, small, discreet ones. I spent the next evening installing them not just outside the workshop, but inside as well, hidden among the rafters. I put more up at our house, covering the front and back doors. Sam watched me, his arms crossed. "What are you doing, Chloe?" "Just a security upgrade," I said, trying to sound casual. "There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood." He didn't believe me, but he was too worn down to argue. He just shook his head and walked away. The feeling of being watched intensified. One morning I arrived at the workshop to find a deep scratch running along the side of my truck. It was fresh, deliberate, a message. Another day, a critical tool, my favorite hand plane, was missing from its spot on the wall. I searched the entire shop for an hour, my frustration mounting. I finally found it tucked away in a drawer on the other side of the room, a place I would never have put it. It was small, petty acts of gaslighting designed to make me feel like I was losing my mind. Was I becoming forgetful, or was someone messing with me? 2 weeks after installing the cameras, I got my answer. I was scrolling through the footage from the previous night, a new obsessive habit I had developed. And then I saw it. At 2:17 a.m., a figure approached the side door of my workshop. The motion-activated infrared camera clicked on, bathing the scene in an eerie black and white. The figure was wearing a hoodie, but as he turned his head to look around, the angle caught his face perfectly. It was Kevin. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him pull a lock-picking kit from his pocket and begin to work on my door. He was clumsy, inept. After fumbling for nearly 10 minutes, he gave up, kicked the door in frustration, and slunk back into the darkness. I sat back in my chair, a cold, hard knot of anger forming in my stomach. This was it. Concrete, undeniable proof. He wasn't just a spoiled brat asking for money. He was a criminal. He was actively trying to break into my place of business, my sanctuary. My first instinct was to call the police. My second was to drive over to the Miller house and smash Kevin's smug face in, but I did neither. I saved the video file to a secure, encrypted hard drive, then I saved a backup to the cloud. What would happen if I confronted them? They would lie. They would deny everything. They would say Kevin was drunk or that I was framing him. They would twist it, turn it back on me, and use it to drive an even bigger wedge between me and Sam. He would be forced to choose between his criminal brother and his paranoid wife. I wasn't sure which one he would choose. A direct confrontation was what they wanted. It would be messy, emotional. It would give them control. I looked at the video file on my computer screen. This wasn't just evidence of a failed break-in. This was ammunition. They had declared war, but they thought they were the only ones with an army. They were wrong. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I wasn't just going to defend. I was going to gather evidence. I was going to build a case. I was going to wait for them to make their next move, and I was going to be ready. The simple woodworker was gone. In her place was someone they had created, a patient, watchful, and very, very angry woman. And I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. After Kevin's failed break-in attempt, a strange and unsettling calm fell over everything. The Millers suddenly backed off. There were no more passive-aggressive dinners, no more probing questions from old family friends, no more sob stories. Instead, they became sickeningly sweet. Brenda started calling Sam every day just to chat. Richard sent me an article about a new type of wood finish he thought I might find interesting. They invited us over for a barbecue where they were the perfect hosts, showering us with compliments and asking nothing in return. It was completely unnerving. It was the quiet before a hurricane. Sam, however, blossomed in this false spring. He was so desperate for peace that he embraced their change of heart without question. "See," he said to me one evening, his eyes brighter than I'd seen them in months. "I told you it would be okay. They were just stressed. They love us, Chloe. They just have a funny way of showing it." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to be wrong about everything. I wanted to smash the hard drives with the video footage and go back to the simple woman I used to be. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a different kind of attack. They had tried to come through the front door with force and failed. Now they were looking for a key to the back door, and they were trying to lull us into leaving it unlocked. Their big move came about a month later. Brenda called Sam with a wonderful, spontaneous idea. She had booked a spa weekend for just the two of them in a beautiful resort a few hours away. It was her treat. A chance for them to reconnect mother and son and get away from all the recent stress. My entire body went on high alert. It was a classic military tactic, divide and conquer. They needed to get Sam alone, away from my influence, where they could have his undivided attention. "You can't go." I said the words, coming out harsher than I intended. Sam's happy expression immediately soured. "What do you mean I can't go? It's a weekend with my mother, Chloe. Why are you trying to control me?" "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect you," I argued. "Don't you see how calculated this is? After everything that's happened, she suddenly wants a mother-son bonding trip. It's a setup, Sam." "A setup for what?" He yelled, his voice full of frustration. "For you to finally relax and be happy. You've become so paranoid you can't even accept a nice gesture. I'm going. I need this. I need a break from all of this." The unspoken words hung in the air, a break from you. It was a blow to the gut. I knew if I pushed any harder, I would only drive him further away. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Go. Just be careful. Please." That weekend, the house felt cavernously empty. The silence was a constant reminder of the distance between us. To keep my mind occupied, I threw myself into my work. I also called my oldest friend Diana, a contractor who had known me since we were kids. I didn't tell her about the money, but I told her about the pressure from my in-laws and the strange things that had been happening. Diana was a blunt, no-nonsense woman. "Sounds to me like they're weasels, girl," she said over the phone. "And weasels will chew through anything to get what they want. You watch your back. People do crazy things when they smell money, even if they only think it's there." Her words were a cold comfort, but it felt good to have someone in my corner, even if she didn't know the whole story. On Saturday afternoon, while I was cleaning up the shop, a man I'd never seen before walked in. He was handsome, dressed in expensive clothes, and had an air of confidence that seemed out of place in my dusty workshop. "You must be Chloe," he said, his smile a little too smooth. "Richard Miller sent me. He said you were the best." My internal alarms went off. Richard was sending me clients now. He said he was looking for a large, custom-built library for his new home. He was charming, but his questions were intensely personal. He moved closer than necessary as I showed him wood samples, his cologne overpowering in the small space. At one point he tripped, stumbling against me, his hand landing on my arm to steady himself. I stepped back immediately, feeling deeply uncomfortable. "I am so sorry," he said, laughing it off. "I'm so clumsy." The entire interaction felt staged, rehearsed. I remained polite but distant, focusing strictly on business. I walked him through my portfolio, gave him a rough quote, and he left promising to call. The moment he was gone, I went straight to my laptop and reviewed the camera footage. It was all there. His overly familiar gestures, the way he positioned himself to be close to me, the fake stumble. It was a clumsy attempt at something, but I wasn't sure what. A honey trap. It seemed too cliché, too obvious. Still, I saved the footage just like I had with Kevin's video. Sam came home on Sunday evening, and he was a different person. The happy, relaxed man who had left on Friday was gone. In his place was a stranger with cold, empty eyes. He walked past me without a word and started packing a bag. "Sam, what's going on? What happened?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound. He wouldn't look at me. He just kept methodically placing clothes into a duffel bag. "I know, Chloe," he said, his voice hollow and devoid of emotion. "What do you know?" "I know you've been lying to me. About everything." He finally turned to face me, and what I saw in his eyes destroyed me. It was a look of complete and utter betrayal. His mother had done her work. 2 days of relentless psychological warfare. Brenda must have twisted every instance of my secrecy, my caution, every argument we'd had, and reframed it as proof of my dishonesty. She had poisoned Sam's mind against me, priming him for the final killing blow. Sam pulled his phone from his pocket and threw it on the bed. On the screen was a photograph. It was of me and the man from the workshop. But it wasn't from the angle of my security camera. It was taken from outside through the workshop window, and it was timed perfectly. It captured the exact moment the man had stumbled into me, his hand on my arm. From that angle, with my back mostly to the window, it didn't look like an accident. It looked like an embrace. It looked intimate. "Who is he, Chloe?" Sam asked, his voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like," I said, my voice desperate. "It's a setup. Your father sent him. I have the whole thing on video, Sam. I can prove it." I rushed to my laptop, ready to show him the footage, the truth. "I don't want to see your video," he said, his voice flat. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies." He couldn't see it. His trust in me had been so thoroughly eroded over the past few months that the foundation was gone. All it took was one perfectly timed push and the whole thing came crashing down. His family had known that a clumsy honey trap wouldn't fool me. It wasn't meant for me. It was meant for him, and it had worked perfectly. "I'm going to stay with my parents for a while," he said, zipping his bag. I need to think." He walked to the door and then he paused, his hand on the knob. He looked back at me, his face, a heartbreaking canvas of pain and confusion. "I don't even know who you are anymore." And then he was gone. I was left standing alone in the house we had built together, surrounded by the furniture I had made for us, holding proof of my innocence that my own husband refused to see. Their revenge wasn't about the money anymore. It was about my absolute annihilation. And I had walked right into their trap. The silence Sam left behind was a living entity. It filled every corner of our small house, creeping into the spaces between the floorboards I had laid and clinging to the curtains he had chosen. For 2 days, I existed in a fog of disbelief and despair. I called his phone a dozen times, but it went straight to voicemail every time. I sent him long, rambling texts trying to explain, pleading with him to just watch the video. My messages were met with a digital wall of silence. I felt like I was screaming into a void. On the 3rd day, I drove to his parents' house. My mind was a chaotic storm of anger, desperation, and a sliver of hope that I could somehow break through to him. As I pulled up to their manicured lawn, Richard was waiting for me on the porch. He was holding a golf club, casually tapping it against the palm of his hand. It wasn't threatening, not overtly, but the message was clear: you are not welcome here. He had a smug, satisfied look on his face, the look of a man who has just won a game he shouldn't have even been playing. "He doesn't want to see you, Chloe," he said before I could even get out of my truck. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. "I need to talk to my husband, Richard," I said, my voice tight with restraint. "That's not going to happen." He took a step forward, the picture of paternal authority. "Sam is very upset. You've hurt him deeply. He needs time with his family, people who actually care about his well-being." "You did this," I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. "This was your plan all along. You sent that man to my shop." He actually chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I have no idea what you're talking about. All I know is my son came to us heartbroken with proof that his wife, the woman who has been so secretive and controlling lately, is cheating on him. It paints a rather ugly picture, doesn't it?" He was gaslighting me, twisting my own caution into a motive for infidelity. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I looked past him towards the house, and I saw a flicker of movement in the upstairs window, Sam's old bedroom. He was there. He was watching. "Sam!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Please just talk to me. Let me show you the video. It's all a lie." The curtain dropped back into place. Richard's smile widened. "He made his choice, Chloe. You should go. Don't make this any uglier than it already, Island." I sat in my truck for a long time after he went back inside, staring at that blank window. Defeat tasted like ash in my mouth. They had him completely insulated. They controlled the narrative, filtering all communication, reinforcing their lies. Any attempt I made to reach him would just be twisted into more proof of my aggression and instability. I drove home feeling a new kind of cold settled deep in my bones. This wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. This was a kidnapping of the mind. They were systematically dismantling my husband's reality and replacing it with their own toxic version, and I was utterly powerless to stop it. Days turned into a week. My work in the shop became my only solace. The familiar feel of wood under my hands, the precision required for a dovetail joint, the focus it took to guide a piece through the table saw, it was the only thing that kept me sane. It was order in the midst of chaos. The rest of my life was a shambles. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I just replayed that last conversation with Sam, that last look on his face over and over again. Then the official assault began. A courier delivered a thick envelope to my door. Inside were legal documents. Sam, or rather Sam's parents through him, had filed for legal separation. And they had hired the most notoriously aggressive divorce attorney in the state, a shark named Marcus Thorne. The documents were brutal. They accused me of infidelity, emotional abuse, and financial misconduct. They claimed I was hiding assets from the marriage and demanded a full and immediate forensic audit of my business and personal finances. It was a declaration of total war. They weren't just trying to take Sam, they were coming for the money they only suspected I had. They were using the divorce as a legal crowbar to pry open my life and take everything. I sat at my kitchen table, the legal papers spread out before me, and I felt something inside me snap. The grief, the despair, it all burned away, and what was left was a core of pure cold rage. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a simple craftswoman, a blue-collar pushover they could easily manipulate and discard. They thought they had cornered me. They were wrong. They had pushed me into a corner, but they had forgotten what a cornered animal does. It doesn't just surrender. It bites back. Hard. I picked up the phone and called a number I had gotten from my own financial advisor. It was for a lawyer he had described as discreet and creative. Her name was Eleanor Vance. I met with her the next day. She was an older woman, sharp and impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. I told her everything. From the forgotten Bitcoin wallet, to Kevin's break-in attempt, to the man in my shop, to the legal separation papers. I didn't hold anything back. I showed her the video files I had saved on my encrypted drive. She watched the footage without a word, her expression unreadable. When the videos were finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Well, Miss Carpenter," she said, a hint of a smile on her lips. "It seems your in-laws have mistaken a buzzsaw for a butter knife. They have my husband," I said, my voice hoarse. "That's all that matters." "Yes," she agreed, her eyes hardening. "And that is where they made their critical mistake. They've moved beyond simple greed into coercion and defamation. Marcus Thorne is a bully. He uses scorched earth tactics to intimidate people into settling. He's not going to expect a real fight. We're going to give him one." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. "What do?" "We do nothing," she said. "Not yet. We let them think their plan is working. We comply with the discovery process, but we do it slowly. We drag our feet. We make them spend money and time. Meanwhile, you and I are going to do some digging of our own. Richard Miller's early retirement from stockbroking. Let's find out how early and how voluntary it really was. Kevin's endless string of failed startups. Let's see who he's been taking money from. They want to conduct a forensic audit of you, fine. We're going to conduct a life audit of them. They've picked a fight with you, Chloe. What they don't realize is that they're about to be in a fight with me. Leaving her office, I didn't feel happy, but I felt focused. The game board had been set. They had made their opening moves driven by greed and arrogance. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't playing for money. I was playing for my life. I was playing for Sam. The legal battle was a slow, grinding war of attrition fought through paperwork and procedural motions. Thorne Sam's lawyer was every bit the shark Eleanor had described. He flooded us with discovery requests, demanding years of bank statements, tax returns, business receipts, anything and everything that could possibly hint at a hidden fortune. It was a classic fishing expedition. They didn't know what they were looking for, but they were determined to turn over every rock. Eleanor's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We gave them everything they asked for, but we buried them in it. For every request, we provided mountains of disorganized, barely relevant paperwork. We made them work for every single scrap of information. We complied with the letter of the law, but we violated its spirit at every turn. It was frustrating, expensive, and it was buying us time. While their legal team was drowning in a sea of my workshop's lumber receipts, Eleanor put a private investigator to work. A quiet, unassuming man named Ben, who looked more like a librarian than a PI. The first crack in the Miller family's pristine facade came from Richard's past. It turned out his early retirement wasn't a choice. He had been quietly forced out of his brokerage firm after being investigated by the SEC for insider trading. He avoided formal charges by resigning and signing a non-disclosure agreement, but the stink of it had followed him, making him unemployable in the financial world. This explained his desperation, his constant search for a big score to reclaim his former glory. He wasn't just chasing wealth, he was chasing redemption in the only language he understood: money. Next was Kevin. Ben's investigation revealed a pattern of petty scams and unpaid debts. His startups were little more than fancy websites and empty promises designed to extract money from gullible friends and, more often than not, his parents. But we found something more. Kevin had a gambling problem, a significant one. Online poker sports betting, he was deep in debt to some very unsavory characters. His desperate plea for $75,000 wasn't for an app. It was to pay off a loan shark who was likely getting tired of waiting. This recontextualized everything. His desperation wasn't an act, it was real. But the cause wasn't a shattered dream. It was the threat of physical harm. And then there was Brenda. On the surface, she was clean. A perfect suburban wife with a passion for her garden club and book club. But Ben was persistent. He looked into the sick friend from her book club, the one who supposedly needed money for medical treatments. He found the woman. She was in perfect health. She had never been sick, never needed money. When Ben gently pressed her, the woman admitted that Brenda had offered her a small cut of any donations she could solicit by using her name. It was a small-time, despicable fraud, but it was a window into her soul. It showed a complete lack of moral character. Eleanor compiled all of this into a neat, devastating file. "This is our leverage," she said, tapping the folder. "We don't use it yet. We hold it. We wait for them to overplay their hand." Meanwhile, I was living in a state of suspended animation. The joy had been surgically removed from my life. Even working in the shop felt different. It was no longer a creative escape. It was a defiant act. Every piece I finished was a testament to the fact that I was still standing. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My friend Diana would stop by with pizza and beer, trying to pull me out of my shell. She'd look at the security camera feeds I had playing on a monitor in the corner of my office. "You're like a damn spy girl," she'd say, shaking her head. "This isn't healthy." "It's necessary," I'd reply. And it was, because they were still watching me. I would catch glimpses of Kevin's car driving slowly past my house. I'd receive hang-up calls in the middle of the night. It was a campaign of low-level psychological harassment designed to wear me down to make me make a mistake. The worst part was the complete radio silence from Sam. His social media went dark. His friends told me he wasn't responding to their texts either. His parents had him on a complete lockdown. I was haunted by the thought of what they were telling him, the lies they were feeding him day after day. Were they telling him I was refusing to cooperate, that I was hiding money from him? Were they slowly convincing him that I had never loved him at all? The thought was a physical pain, a constant ache in my chest. I had the truth video, evidence, financial records, a mountain of proof, but it was worthless if I couldn't get it to him. The breaking point came one Friday evening. I was at the grocery store buying a sad single-person dinner when I saw him. He was across the aisle in the cereal section. For a moment, my heart soared. He was alone. This was my chance. I started walking towards him, 100 frantic explanations forming in my mind. But then I saw his face under the harsh fluorescent lights. He looked thin, pale. His eyes, which used to be so full of life, were dull and empty. He looked like a ghost. As he reached for a box of cereal, his sleeve rode up and I saw it. A dark, ugly bruise on his forearm, the distinct shape of fingerprints. Time stopped. The air left my lungs. It wasn't a bruise from bumping into a table. It was the mark of someone grabbing him. Hard. My mind instantly flashed to Richard tapping that golf club, to Kevin kicking my workshop door in a fit of rage, to Brenda's ice-cold voice on the phone. This had escalated beyond lies and manipulation. They weren't just controlling him psychologically. They were hurting him. He saw me then. His eyes widened, not with recognition or love, but with pure animal fear. He dropped the cereal box, turned, and practically ran out of the store. I didn't follow him. I was frozen in place, the world tilting on its axis. The legal strategy, the patient weighting the leverage, it all went out the window. This wasn't a game of chess anymore. My husband was in danger. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. I drove home in a blind rage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. When I got inside, I didn't call Eleanor. I didn't call the police. I opened my laptop, went to my encrypted folder, and I started a new file. The time for defense was over. It was time to attack. It was time to burn their whole world to the ground. The sight of that bruise on Sam's arm changed the chemical composition of my blood. The calculated patience Eleanor had instilled in me evaporated, replaced by a white-hot primal urgency. They had physically harmed him. Every other grievance, the manipulation, the theft, the lies paled in comparison. I sat in my office for hours that night, the security camera feeds playing on the monitor like some dystopian art installation. I wasn't just watching for them anymore. I was hunting. I pored over the weeks of footage I had accumulated, looking for anything I might have missed. I created a timeline. I cross-referenced the dates of their legal filings with their movements. A pattern began to emerge. They were sloppy, arrogant. Kevin's car would appear near my house hours before a new motion was filed by their lawyer. Richard would meet with a man in a parked car down the street, a man Ben later identified as a bottom-feeder private investigator known for his willingness to bend the law. They thought they were being clever, but they were leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs. My plan began to form not as a legal strategy, but as a rescue mission. I couldn't just throw evidence at a judge. I had to get to Sam. I had to break through the fortress his parents had built around him. I started with his friends, the ones he had been ignoring. I didn't just call them. I went to see them in person. I showed them a picture of the bruise I had taken with my phone in the grocery store. I showed them the video of the man in my shop. I laid out the whole ugly story, my voice raw with a desperate sincerity. At first they were hesitant, caught between their loyalty to Sam and the bizarre story I was telling. But the evidence was undeniable. One of them, a man named Jason, who had been Sam's best man, finally broke. "He's not okay, Chloe," Jason admitted, his eyes filled with concern. "His mom answers all his texts now. It doesn't even sound like him. We've all been so worried. I had found my Trojan horse. Jason agreed to help. The plan was simple, but it relied on perfect execution. The Millers held a family dinner every Sunday, a ritual they never broke. Jason would text Brenda on Sunday afternoon, claiming to have a personal crisis and needing to speak with Sam urgently. Brenda, eager to maintain the illusion of being a supportive gatekeeper, would likely allow a short, supervised phone call. During that call, Jason's only job was to say a single code phrase we had agreed upon. "Do you remember that gallery opening in Portland?" It was a reference to a trip the three of us had taken years ago, a happy memory. But to Sam, it would mean, check your old art history email account, the one your parents don't know about. While this was in motion, I was preparing the package. I spent an entire day compiling everything into a single comprehensive digital file. The video of Kevin's break-in attempt. The video of the man in my shop edited side by side with the photo Sam had been sent to show the fraudulent angle. Ben's complete investigation files on Richard Kevin and Brenda, the SEC investigation, the gambling debts, the charity fraud. I wrote a long, detailed letter to Sam, not just explaining the evidence, but pouring out my heart, telling him about the night I found the Bitcoin, the fear I felt, and my stupid, clumsy attempts to protect him. I admitted I had been secretive and had made mistakes, but I swore that every action I took was born out of love for him and fear of what his family would do. It was the whole truth, ugly and complicated. On Sunday, I was a wreck. I sat in my workshop staring at my phone, my stomach in knots. At 4:15 p.m., I got a text from Jason Dunn. Call went as planned. Now all I could do was wait. I had sent the email with the file attached the moment Jason gave me the signal. The subject line was simply, "The truth." I didn't know if Sam would get it. I didn't know if he would even look. I had placed all my faith in a shared memory and a forgotten password. For the next several hours, there was nothing. Silence. The sun went down. I sat in the darkness of my workshop, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face. I felt a profound sense of failure. It hadn't worked. They had him too tightly controlled. My grand plan had been nothing more than a desperate Hail Mary. At around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My first thought was that it was another harassment call from the Millers. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello," I said, my voice wary. "Chloe." The voice was a faint whisper choked with tears. It was Sam. My heart stopped. "Sam, baby, are you okay? Where are you?" I'm at a gas station a few miles from the house," he sobbed. "I saw it, Chloe. I saw everything. The videos. My dad. My brother. Oh my God, what they did!" He was hyperventilating his words, tumbling over each other in a torrent of shock and horror. "I have to get out of here. My dad. He grabbed me again tonight when I tried to leave my room. He locked my door. I had to climb out my window. Chloe, I'm so scared." The cold rage from the grocery store came flooding back 10 times stronger. "Stay right there," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Don't move. Lock the doors. I'm coming to get you. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I grabbed my keys and my phone. As I ran out the door, I made one other call. "Eleanor, it's Chloe. It's happening. He's out. But they know. They will have realized he's gone by now. They're going to come after us." "Where are you going?" Eleanor's voice was sharp, all business. "I'm getting my husband," I said. "And then I don't know. A hotel? A friend's place?" "No," she said firmly. "That's the first place they'll look. You're not going to run. You're going to my office. Now. Ben is already on his way to meet you there. Get Sam and you drive straight to my firm's building. Don't stop for anything. I'll handle the rest." The drive to that gas station was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Every headlight in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. When I pulled in, I saw him huddled in the corner of the brightly lit convenience store looking small and terrified. He ran out and threw himself into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. As I held him, rocking him gently, I looked over his shoulder back in the direction of his parents' house. I knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the real war. We had just stolen their most valuable asset, their son, and their revenge was going to be swift and terrifying. The law firm of Vance and Sterling was located in a sleek, imposing glass tower downtown. It was after 11 p.m. and the building was a dark monolith against the city skyline, but the lights were on in Eleanor's 30th floor office. Ben, the private investigator, met us in the secure parking garage. He was a calming presence in the swirling chaos of my emotions. He didn't ask questions. He just guided us silently into a private elevator that opened directly into Eleanor's suite. The office was a fortress of mahogany and leather. Eleanor was waiting for us, not in a suit, but in a comfortable sweater, a cup of tea in her hand. She looked more like a concerned aunt than a high-powered attorney, but her eyes were sharp, focused. Sam was still trembling, clinging to my hand as if it were a lifeline. Eleanor guided him to a soft leather couch. "Sam," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I know this is overwhelming, but you are safe here. Nothing can happen to you here. Can you tell me what happened tonight after you saw the email?" Hesitantly, Sam began to speak. He described how he had made an excuse to use the bathroom, locking the door, and frantically logging into his old email on his phone. He talked about the sickening wave of realization as he watched the videos, the dawning horror as he read the reports on his family, the people he had trusted implicitly, the narrative he had believed about my cruelty. It all disintegrated in a matter of minutes. When he confronted them, his mother had tried to deny it, but the look on his father's face told him everything he needed to know. He didn't try to lie. He got angry. He told him he was ungrateful, that everything they did was to secure his future from the woman who was trying to steal it. When he tried to leave the room, his father grabbed his arm, leaving the bruise that would later become a key piece of evidence, and locked him in. As he spoke, Ben was quietly typing on his laptop. "Thorne just filed an emergency motion," he said, not looking up, "claiming you've abducted your husband, Chloe. He's painting you as a violent, unstable wife who has kidnapped her vulnerable husband against his will. He also just put a PI on you," Ben continued. "A real scumbag named Marco. Specializes in aggressive surveillance. He'll be looking for your truck, trying to track your phones." "My phones are in a Faraday bag in my car," I said. "Sam's is in there too." Eleanor gave me a nod of approval. "Good. They are flying blind. For now, but they're desperate. Richard and Kevin are not stable men. They feel control slipping away, and they are going to do something reckless." Just then, Eleanor's desk phone buzzed. It was the building's night security chief. "They're here," she said, her voice grim. "Richard and Kevin Miller are in the lobby demanding to be let up. They're telling security their son is being held here against his will." Sam flinched, his eyes wide with panic. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my protective instincts kicking into high gear. I stood up, moving to stand between Sam and the door. "Relax," Eleanor commanded, holding up a hand. "Let them scream. They have no authority here. Security will handle them. This is good. They are being exactly who we thought they would be: arrogant, entitled, and loud." She instructed security to keep them in the lobby and to log every threat they made. For the next hour, it was a siege. My phone started blowing up with texts from numbers I didn't recognize clearly from Kevin, filled with vile threats. They were trying to provoke me, to get me to come down. We ignored it all. Ben was tracking their financials in real time. "Something's happening," he said suddenly. Richard just made a large wire transfer from his brokerage account. $25,000. To an LLC I've never seen before. Ben's fingers flew across the keyboard. After a few tense minutes of silence, he swore under his breath. "The LLC is a shell corporation. It's owned by Marco. The PI..." A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't about surveillance anymore. "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It means your father-in-law just paid a very dangerous man a lot of money," Eleanor said, her voice dangerously quiet. "It's an off-the-books payment. This has escalated beyond legal harassment. This is a retainer for something criminal. We were no longer just dealing with greedy in-laws. We were dealing with people who were willing to cross a very dark line. The legal battle was just a smokescreen. The real threat was physical. My workshop. The place that was my sanctuary, the place where this all began. It was my only other real asset, my life's work. It was vulnerable. He's going to go after my shop, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. All my tools, my inventory, my client projects. It's all there. It's more than that, Ben said, his face pale. Marco's specialty isn't just surveillance. It's problem resolution. He has a history. Things have a way of catching fire around him. Arson. They were going to burn it all down. They were going to destroy my livelihood, my identity, and send a message that they would stop at nothing. They couldn't get the money, so they would destroy the woman who had it. Security just reported they've left the lobby, Eleanor announced. But they didn't leave the garage. Another car, a black sedan, just picked them up from the back exit. That's Marco's car, Ben confirmed. They're on the move. I looked at Sam. His face was a mask of terror, not for himself, but for me. I looked at Eleanor. The time for legal maneuvering was over. The time for defense was over. Call the police, I said. Call them now. Tell them a man named Marco, paid by Richard Miller, is on his way to my workshop to burn it down. Tell them there is evidence of a murder for hire plot. It's not murder for hire, Chloe Eleanor corrected gently. It is if I'm inside when it happens, I said, my voice cold as stone. I grabbed my jacket. What are you doing? Sam cried, grabbing my arm. You can't go there, I have to, I said, looking him in the eyes. This ends tonight. Ben, I need you to do something for me. I need you to get remote access to my workshop's security server. Can you do that? Already on it, he said, not missing a beat. Good, I said, because they're expecting an empty building. We're going to give them a surprise. My plan was insane. It was reckless. But sitting here hiding while they destroyed the last piece of my old life was not an option. I was going to confront them. I was going to end this one way or another in the place where I was strongest, my workshop. The drive to the workshop was a blur of adrenaline and single-minded purpose. I wasn't the terrified woman hiding a secret anymore. I wasn't the grieving wife. I was a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. I parked my truck several blocks away and approached on foot, sticking to the shadows of the industrial park. Eleanor had the police on a direct line, but she had convinced them to hold back a few blocks away to wait for my signal. She understood that we needed to catch them in the act red-handed and undeniable. Through Ben's remote access, I had a live feed of my own security cameras on my phone. The workshop was dark silent. My fortress. I slipped in through a back window I had left, intentionally unlatched my movements, silent and practiced in the familiar darkness. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and varnished the smell of home. I moved to my office, a small glass-walled room at the back, and crouched in the shadows, my phone in my hand, watching the exterior cameras. I was the ghost in my own machine. It wasn't a long wait. 10 minutes later, Marco's black sedan rolled to a stop down the street. 3 figures got out. Marco, a large, brutish-looking man, and Richard and Kevin, who looked pathetic and small in the darkness. They were carrying gas cans. My heart pounded with a cold, furious rhythm. This was real. They were really going to do it. I watched on my screen as Marco expertly picked the lock on the side door, the same door Kevin had failed so miserably to open. They slipped inside. On my interior camera feed, I could see their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "Spread it around," Marco grunted. "On the wood piles, the finishing station. Make sure it goes up fast." Richard and Kevin moved like clumsy minions splashing gasoline with trembling hands. They were destroying years of my work, my art, my soul. They doused a stack of rare black walnut I had been saving for a special commission. They soaked a beautiful cherry cradle I had just finished for a client's first baby. It was a desecration. "Dad, I don't know about this," Kevin whispered, his voice shaking. Shut up and pour, Richard hissed. She brought this on herself. On all of us. They were in the main room just outside my office. This was my chance. I sent the signal to Eleanor now. I could hear the distant sound of sirens approaching. Marco heard it too. Cops! Someone must have tipped them off. Let's go, he yelled, pulling out a lighter. No, I roared, bursting out of the office. I flipped the main breaker switch on the wall, and the huge overhead fluorescent lights flickered to life, flooding the workshop in a stark, unforgiving glare. The three of them froze, caught like rats in a trap. Their faces were masks of shock and disbelief. Marco recovered first. He lunged at me, a surprisingly agile move for a man his size. But he was in my world now. I sidestepped, grabbing a heavy oak mallet from my workbench and swinging it. It connected with his wrist with a sickening crunch. The lighter clattered to the gasoline-soaked floor. Marco screamed in pain, clutching his broken hand. Before Richard or Kevin could react, the main doors of the workshop burst open, and police officers swarmed in guns drawn. Drop it. Get on the ground. Now. It was over in seconds. Richard and Kevin crumpled to the floor, sobbing, reeking of gasoline and failure. Marco was groaning, cradling his shattered wrist. As they were cuffed and led away, Richard looked at me, his eyes filled with a venomous, impotent rage. You'll get nothing, he spat. He'll never forgive you for this. He was wrong. The year that followed was one of slow, difficult reconstruction. Not of my workshop, which was thankfully saved, but of our lives. The legal case was a slam dunk. With the video evidence of the attempted arson, the conspiracy charges, and the mountain of financial and emotional abuse Eleanor had compiled, the Millers had no defense. Marco, facing serious charges, turned on them, completely testifying about the murder-for-hire plot in exchange for a lighter sentence. Richard and Kevin received long prison sentences. Brenda, implicated in the conspiracy and the fraud, received a shorter sentence, but was left with nothing. Her reputation shattered, her house sold to pay legal fees. The $3 million, which had been the catalyst for so much destruction, became a tool for healing. We used it to pay for therapy for Sam, helping him unpack years of emotional manipulation and abuse at the hands of his family. We used it to rebuild not our house, but our sense of security and trust. We left the small house and all its painful memories behind. I bought that plot of land out in the country we had always dreamed of, and together, piece by piece, I designed and we built our new home. Sam found his passion again working with a nonprofit that helps victims of domestic abuse, using his experience to guide others out of the darkness. Our relationship isn't the same as it was before. The naive simplicity is gone forever. But it has been replaced by something stronger, something forged in fire and tempered by truth. We communicate on a level we never had to before. We don't take our peace for granted. Sometimes late at night, I walk out into my new, larger workshop. The scent of pine and linseed oil is the same. I pick up a piece of wood and feel the grain, the story it has to tell. The money didn't change who I was, but the fight to protect it, and to protect my husband, revealed who I could be. Greed is a powerful force. It can hollow people out, turn family into strangers and strangers into monsters. But it has a weakness. It's loud, it's arrogant, and it always underestimates the quiet strength of a woman who is simply trying to build a good life with the man she loves. They tried to burn down my world, but they forgot that I'm a woodworker. I know how to build things back from the ashes stronger than they were before.